I've only just got enough water, I think, to get to Turkestan, and I just don't exactly know where I am. The road has finally improved from being a dirt track to tarmac, which I haven't seen for 3 days now, so I'll celebrate. I'm having these biscuits.
In spring 2006, when I was 37, I decided to leave Hong Kong, where I'd lived and worked through most of my 30s, and return to the UK. And instead of flying back to London, I decided to take my bike and ride. When I had started to think about moving back to Britain, to me it seemed obvious that it would be brilliant to do the journey overland slowly. In my flat in Hong Kong, I would look at my Times Atlas of the world. There was Hong Kong at the extreme east of Eurasia, and there was Britain far off in the west, and there was all this land in between which all looked so interesting. What were all those places like? Of course, you could fly to different places and go see one spot or another. I much prefer to go overland by train, or absolutely the best option, by bike, and see how everything joins up. I was born and brought up in South Manchester, within sight of these hills and within fairly easy reach of roads like these. As soon as I could ride a bike, I could explore it all. How amazing! You just had to pedal. Since I was a child, it was obvious to me to want to ride over the hills and just keep going and see what you could find on the other side. It wasn't easy to leave. Hong Kong had been brilliant. It's a fascinating place, and I had interesting work and lovely colleagues and friends. When I told people what I was planning, they were mostly shocked and asked why I wanted to make that long journey by bike. And actually, it was quite hard to explain. Just saying, well, look at the map, there are loads of interesting places, left most people unconvinced. Maybe by getting on the bike and doing it, I could come up with a good way to answer that question. Once I had decided to go, I became crazily busy. I made huge lists of things I had to do, wrapping up my job, getting rid of my flat and all my things, and putting together my kit. And planning the route, working out when to go and how long it might take. Cycling friends from the local club were as excited about it as I was. And friends also helped me set up a charity project around the ride, using the trip to raise money for Right to Play to help children in Pakistan, where there'd been a massive earthquake, and for Malop to Pang, a charity in Cambodia, to build a sports centre at their refuge for street children. People were amazingly kind, coming forward with all sorts of help. I discovered that once you kick off something fairly big that you are really enthusiastic about, people can be absolutely brilliant. For weeks, I was too busy and excited to be nervous. But the day I finally left, when I pedalled the very first mile down to the Star Ferry, I was really nervous. And mainly I was worried that something would go wrong with the bike right at the start and people would all see it and worry about me.
Should we do? We take a picture.
I need to take a bunch of my biscuits to go.
I watched the skyscrapers of Hong Kong Island as the water between me and them stretched wider and wider. Somewhere amongst the thousands of windows was the window of my little Hong Kong flat. But it wasn't mine anymore. All I had now were my bags and my bike. My lovely Hong Kong Cycling Club friends joined me for the first day as a sort of cavalcade. From Zhuhai, we bowled up the Pearl River Delta to Zhongshan, where I was going to stay the first night. I'd picked a fancy place with a pool and sun terraces. But it was evening now. My friends had to head back to Hong Kong, to home and to normal life. And suddenly I was all alone at the start of this adventure. The next day was over 30 degrees and there was a strong headwind. I eased myself into each stretch of road, pressing softly on the pedals, taking all the care I could of myself, nervously conscious that this was the start of the longest ride I'd ever done. I stopped as I crossed rivers to look at the wide water. Now I felt less stressed. Actually, now I felt madly happy to be on the way, to be actually doing this big thing. I reached the city of Jiangmen and stopped for the night. The next day, eating breakfast in the hotel, I saw work people in office suits, and I sat on my own in my shorts with my maps and felt strange and guilty that I was not working. I set out through the city, heading for a town called Kaiping, about 60 kilometres away. One of the challenges is that there aren't any signs in the villages, so to find out where you are you have to check by looking at buildings. So for example, if there's a public administration building of some kind, you can look on a sign and see where you are. You also just have to keep asking. I ask the way all the time, every single junction. I ask people at the edge of villages, or else I even just shout down people on motorbikes or people driving trucks. But I did make mistakes. After missing a turn and going a long way wrong, in the afternoon I decided to just sit in the shade for a while, drinking soybean milk and talking to a woman with her little girl. She was a migrant worker from a town in the next province. She was proud and somehow cheered when I said I was going to pass through her hometown. She missed her husband, she said. Then I set off again in the heat and the wind. I'm on the way between Sheikou and Taipei, and had quite a long day. I didn't expect it, but it's been really windy, and I've had it in my face pretty much all day. So I've made quite slow progress, really slow in some kind of just walking with the wind howling against me. So now I made a mistake earlier on with the route, so I didn't actually mean to come on this road, but you know, it's quite a busy road. Going past fields on the apparently From Kaiping, I aimed for Zhaoqing, a city on the West River, about 120 kilometres away. If the wind continued to blow against me, I thought it might take me 2 days to get there.
It's Wednesday morning, I think it's the 12th or the 13th of April, and I'm riding through some paddy fields and small villages just north of Taiping in Guangdong province. This is the area with watchtowers, and I actually am quite glad I didn't go to the tourist spots. There are 2 or 3 places which everyone tells me you should go, and probably they're very nice, but they were a little bit out of the way, so I decided I would just go straight to where I'm aiming this evening, which is Zhaoqing. In fact, I've seen tons of watchtowers. A couple of over there, and one here. So these are the towers which have been abandoned. They were built apparently from the 18th century, and then probably these are nothing like so old. 17th century. The next place I'm expecting to reach is first of all Shatang, and then a place called Tanko. This is actually some of the most lovely riding that I've had the chance to do. There's hardly any traffic. The scenery is really interesting, quite beautiful in some parts, and the only thing is it's still really windy, but I don't really mind too much. Mainly it's kind of coming on the quarter, and you can see I'm blowing around a bit more. It's coming on the quarter, or sometimes head, but quarter or side wind, so it could be worse.
In fact, I had a huge tailwind much of the rest of the day, so I bowled along. I was on minor roads with hardly any traffic, just a few motorbikes and farmers cranking along on old bikes.
To navigate, I'm using a local atlas. The scale's about 1 to 360,000 or 1 to 400,000, which is great because most of the small villages are marked on the map. So I can take county level or even lower than county level roads and see all sorts of things.
About 40 kilometres north of Kaiping, the watchtowers petered out. There were just small villages with schools full of children. I felt so happy passing the pineapple fields and the duck farms. Sometimes the road here in South China reminded me suddenly of lanes around Oxford, near Longhanborough and Blenheim. Strange, sudden flashbacks to roads I'd trained on over 10 years previously. In a place called Gunglo, I stopped at a tea house. Two old people invited me to join them, and I couldn't stop them hopping up to get me a glass beaker and showing me how to rinse it in hot tea. At the next place, I bought a mango and the woman peeled it for me, making petals like a flower. The tailwind was pushing me up the road northwards. I had decided to try and bash out the 120 kilometres to Zhaoqing in a single day, and I raced along. Sticks were breaking off trees and tumbling up the road with me in the wind. Bamboos were creaking. Willows were bending and rattling. In the late afternoon, old men walking home with ploughs on their backs were shouting, "What a gale!" to each other. As the sun sank lower, I hurried along, anxious that I wouldn't reach the city before nightfall. From higher ground, I saw the sun setting orange over the fish ponds. In the end, I didn't reach Jiaqing. At nearly 7 p.m, after about 100 kilometres, I reached a nearby place called Gaoyao. It was becoming dark, and I stopped and went to a hotel where I fell asleep in my clothes.